Welcome and welcome back, everybody. T here, and in today's video, we're trying a little bit of a new format. I'm going to share with you my board game history from January 2023, and not sponsored, but today we will be using the BG Stats app, which I was so lovingly peer pressured into finally getting. It just provides a really easy way to track your plays as well as a lot of other data, which you'll see here in this video. It looks like here in January, I was able to play 103 games with 87 different games. Woo! Very exciting, and 14 of those games were new to me. So some were off of my shelf of shame, some were on BGA, trying out new games, and some were games that were shown to me by friends. So looking at our player counts, I definitely played with 2 more than anything else, both in person and definitely attributed to playing on BGA. And if we look at the frequency in terms of which days had the most plays, Sunday is the day. It's really nice to be able to play with friends who live abroad because of time zone differences. That's hard to do during the week, and also with people in person too. Sometimes after work, you just don't have the brain power to play a bunch of games after work or to play some really heavy titles. So Sunday is the day to go. Most of my plays were at home, but we have almost an equal amount on BGA. Again, that definitely contributes to the frequency and how many games I was able to play. It's just really great to have that option here. And getting right down to it, my most played games were actually Micro Macro Crime City and Panic Lab with 4 plays each. Now, Micro Macro Crime City was one that I put off playing for a while because I wasn't sure I would like it. While I do love deduction games, while I do love mystery games, escape room games, this one I wasn't sure that I would love as much, even though it has won many awards and has been talked about a lot and is very well loved in the community, I feel. I think the main thing for me is that when I play these types of games, I like to have multiple different components to interact with versus just looking at a big map and trying to figure out who done it. So this one, after playing 4 scenarios, wasn't really for me. Panic Lab, on the other hand, one of my favorite games to play in person and now on Board Game Arena. Super exciting. It's a speed game. It's a brain burner. If you haven't checked it out and you're into that, definitely do. Stellarion is the newest game in the Shadi Torbay Oneverse series, and I was a little skeptical about the theme of the game. It didn't grip me quite as much as some of his other titles, but I have to say that the mechanics really held up. And this is one that I definitely want to make a solo party video on sooner rather than later, hopefully. We also have Kintsugi, which is an out-of-print button-shy title. And if you're not familiar, there is a Japanese aesthetic called wabi-sabi, which focuses on highlighting imperfections in art and finding the beauty in them. So Kintsugi is kind of an extension or a branch of that specific to pottery, where when a pot breaks, instead of kind of refinishing it and trying to restore it to its original form, instead they inlay gold into the cracks to highlight those imperfections. And this is a tile-laying game where you're going to be having that gold border between different colors and trying to get a little bit of like area majority, but you want the fewest areas possible. I wasn't really sure how this would differ from other tiling games. There are so many variations of them out there, but Kintsugi is really something unique. I was able to play it with 3 players, which is the max player count at a Japanese marketplace while we were waiting for ramen. What a great day. And Kintsugi really surprised me with how beautiful it was. Again, unfortunately it's out of print, but I was able to stalk somebody on Board Game Geek who had it on their trade list. And I'm like, hey, you want to trade for cash? I'm local. So I'm glad I got my hands on it. Another button shy game that I got to try is Jedi Dinah. Button Shy was nice enough to send this to me because I forgot to put it in my Black Friday order. But this is a 9-card in-hand Western themed game. And while the rules were a little bit of a bear to get through, which I'll elaborate a little more on in my solo party video, the actual game itself was really cool, really engaging. And I'm really loving these in-hand micro games lately. So that was a great addition. Another first for me was Heat Pedal to the Metal. Now, as you'll know, I'm not a huge fan of racing games. Heat had some really cool mechanics with push your luck and clogging up your deck with your engine getting like heated and cooling it down. So I thought that part of it was really cool. I think the one thing that was a letdown for me was that you're not accounting for where you are in the lane. Like if you're on the inside of the lane, outside of the lane, and when you get to curves, you have to account for your speed and not go too fast. But there's nothing to mitigate like that side-to-side motion. Now again, I'm not an expert in racing games. I'm not an expert in any means in actual racing. I can see how this streamlined, kind of pared down, focus on just how many spaces you're moving and when might appeal to some people, but for me, it felt like it was an element that was missing. I also had my first play of Galileo Project. Now, I am a huge fan of the first game in this overall universe called Ganymede. Galileo project, when it was announced, I was like, ooh, it looks beautiful. Like, this is one of the schmaxiest games I've ever seen. Unfortunately, on my first play, I wasn't as gripped because the mechanics were not quite as schmaxy as the actual aesthetic and overall presentation of the game, which was a little bit disappointing. So I'm not necessarily sure that this is one that I want to add to my collection. Maybe if someone wants to play it, I will, but I was a little disappointed. And we also have Marvel Dice Thrones here. I'd never played Dice Throne before, similar to Micro Macro. It's not one that I was sure that I would enjoy quite as much. I am a big fan of the mechanics of Ashes, Rise of the Phoenixborn. I play the Broken First Edition. I haven't gotten to play the new balanced version yet, but the mechanics in that game really gripped me. And I felt like Dice Throne might be a pared down version of that, which again, I can see the appeal, I can see the marketability. But yes, for me, if I'm playing a 2-player tactical game that's gonna take, probably around an hour, I definitely want a little more going on. So for me, it was fun to be able to try it out, but I think I would rather play Ashes in the future. And moving right along, I got to learn and play Gold West. This is one that has been recommended to me by quite a few different people based on my love of Mancala mechanics in games. Unfortunately, this one's out of print right now, but I've heard some rumors that Renegade Games might be picking up some of these TMG titles, including Gold West, so maybe I'll be able to get my hands on a physical copy in the near future. And we also have Last Message, which was a first play for me. Now, I have to eat my words a little bit here because I just said Micro Macro. I didn't like just looking at the big grid and trying to figure out what was going on, but Last Message spruces this up quite a bit. So you have different roles. It's a one versus all. You have a criminal who's going to pick who they are on this huge map, Where's Waldo style whodunit. Then you have a victim who is going to write out as many clues as they can as their last message. So they don't say what the crime is, but Now, the interesting thing is the victim has a limited amount of time to write down, draw, whatever they want. Criminal then comes in and gets rid of some of the evidence by removing and erasing some of the squares in the grid. The detectives then have to use the remaining clues or fragments of clues to deduce who the actual criminal is before they can get away. So this takes everything about Micro Macro with looking at different clues and looking at what's happening in the scene, but it gives it a really fun edge of one versus all. You got that team kind of mechanic. There's a timer. There's a limited number of rounds. There's a little bit more pressure in the scenario and a little bit more going on. So this for me was an engaging alternative to that. We also have my first play of Fruition, which is one of the games on my Shelf of Shame update video from the beginning of the year. A button shy game, a word association game. If you want to hear more about it, you can definitely watch that video right after this. And a first play of Dodely Do occurred this past month. This is a speed game. As y'all know, I love speed games where you're looking for the number of matching animals or the number of matching colors. But if those two things are equal, instead you have to slap the deck and say Dodely Do. So just a really fun, silly game, and definitely one that I'm keeping an eye out for. I also got my first play of Handsome, which is another button shy game, unfortunately out of print. This is a word game, and it does a great job of condensing it down to 18 cards. One of the things I really appreciate is that it eliminates some of the issues that other word playing games have, which is you might not have a good balance of consonants and vowels on your turn. In Handsome, you only have cards that are consonants, and any vowels that you want to use are free for you to use from your mind. There aren't specific cards you need to get. So it does a great job of, again, eliminating that issue, paring it down to an 18 card game. And moving right along, I do have to highlight Stew. This was not a first play for me this month, but it's a game that I love that I don't get to talk about enough on the channel. Designed by Jason Glover, the art is by Jason Glover. It's just, it's a fantastic little bluffing game where you are pulling ingredients and putting them into a stew. And once you think that the stew has enough points, you are going to say stew and then flip them over. But vermin will actually come in and eat different ingredients from the stew as you go along. This is very similar to Welcome to the Dungeon, if you've ever played that. This is just a really great one. Again, I don't get to talk about it enough on the channel because it doesn't have solo play. It's 2 to 4 players, but this is a great one if you are not exclusively a solo gamer. We have a few other first plays, Dandelions from Board Game Tables. I've been really split on the small box games from Board Game Tables. I'm gonna be honest, GPS and Sequoia, I absolutely hated. Mountain Goats, I didn't enjoy personally, but I can see how people would like it. Ghost of Christmas is one of my favorite freaking trick-taking games. So good. So I wasn't sure how I was gonna feel about Dandelions. I really like the aesthetic, but I have to say, I believe it's a 2 to 3 player game. At 3 players, I would never consider playing this unless I was maybe playing with like kids, which I don't do. And at 2 players, it's really not my jam. I could see this being like a really relaxing, easy kind of solo puzzle if there was an automa, but outside of that, there wasn't quite enough going on for me to warrant bringing it to the table with other people. And my last new play here was Turing Machine. Now this is another one that I bought specifically thinking this will be a solo activity for me to play. And after reading the rules and playing through it, I have to say that that is definitely the case. The only benefit to playing with other people, I think for me, would be to show them how innovative the game is, which is very cool. But in terms of the actual mechanics and competition, it's really just who can solve the puzzle first. And not even with a timer, with a pressure situation, just who can make the fewest calculations. Now, in the easier puzzles, it's a little more luck-based. In later puzzles, I know that that is mitigated by some more difficult computations and more sequences of numbers that you have to guess. But I think even then, this is something that I enjoy mostly solo, and I don't really see, for me, the benefit of playing it with other people at the table and trying to see like who can figure it out first. I think in that case, I would probably prefer to play a deduction game like Cryptid, where you're actually interacting with the other players, versus this where you're just kind of checking and seeing who can get there first. But there you have it. Those are 87 different games which I was able to play this past month with 103 plays. So let me know in the comments down below, what were some of your gaming highlights from January 2023? Any new games that you tried, or were there games in my list that you saw that you want a little bit more information on? Thank you so much as always for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Bye.